civil rights, human rights activists, good nuclear physicists, and I assume intelligence agencies, that there could be leakage of fissile materials into the hands of radical Islamists. I don't have much judgment about that, but I'm told by Pakistani nuclear physicists that it's quite feasible for small quantities of fissile materials to be leaked and to be converted without too much difficulty into maybe a dirty bomb or something like that. Well, you know, that's kind of the ultimate nightmare. Nuclear weapons going off in London and New York. And the Obama policies are carrying it forward. You can read about this in the foreign policy literature. The specialists on Pakistan are deeply concerned about it. And you can read about it in WikiLeaks. The ambassador to Pakistan, who supports the policies, was nevertheless warning about it. Well, you know, that's pretty dangerous. That's pressing forward on the kind of threat to all of us that's a real potential threat to survival. And it's not the only case. So on this particular issue, I think Obama is in fact worse than Bush. That's not the only case. So there's an island in the Indian Ocean. Diego Garcia was a British protectorate. The British, at the bidding of the United States, the British threw out the population so that the United States could build a huge military base there. That's one of the major bases that's used for bombing the Middle East and Central Asia. Well, that's bad enough, but under Obama, it's getting much worse. Obama built up the base, fortified the base, so that it now can house nuclear-powered submarines with nuclear weapons. This is aimed at Iran, incidentally, of course. So that's an Obama contribution. And furthermore, there was a program which was initiated under Bush, but kind of languished. It was a program of developing what's called deep penetration ordnance, sometimes called bunker buster bombs. The biggest bombs in the arsenal, short of nuclear weapons, which penetrate, deeply into the earth to destroy underground installations. Well, that was initiated under Bush, but kind of didn't go very far. As soon as Obama came in, one of his first acts was to accelerate the development of these weapons. They're aimed at Iran, and everyone knows it, and they're now being placed, stored on Diego Garcia, targeting Iran. Speak of actions and threatening destruction. That's serious. Those are Obama operations. As far as the propaganda model is concerned, Obama is a master of propaganda, and he's loved in Europe for that reason. European leaders and intellectuals don't like to be insulted to their face, and Bush was insulting them. Bush, Rumsfeld, and others said straight out, literally, they said, "You do what we say or you're irrelevant." That was the word that was used. Okay? They don't like to hear that. They like to be treated politely, with respect. So treat them with respect, and then when you go back home, make it clear that they're irrelevant. That's okay. It's not the policies that matter, it's the rhetoric. Actually, there's a nice line about this, which goes back to 1962. At the peak of the missile crisis in 1962, we have a ton of evidence about this now, it's all been declassified, that US planners were working out plans for operations that probably would destroy England, and the rest of Europe too, but in particular England. They wouldn't destroy the United States, the Russians weren't capable of that. But they were working out plans which might lead to the destruction of England. They wouldn't tell the British about it. And if you look at the internal discourse among the smart guys in Washington, George Bundy, Walt Rostow, and the rest, their line was that the British are too emotional and unsophisticated. They can't be trusted with this kind of complicated reasoning and information. So the British Prime Minister, Macmillan, couldn't find out what was going on, and he was pretty upset about it. Well, right at that point, one senior Kennedy advisor defined what's called the special relationship with England. The special relationship means England is our lieutenant. The fashionable word is partner. But they like to hear the fashionable word. So at home, we know they're the lieutenant. Well, that's the difference between Bush and Obama. He went out straight and said, you're our lieutenant. Obama says, you're our partner, but then treats them like their lieutenant. So that's okay. So it's in terms of propaganda, it's a big improvement. That's why Europe loved them so much.
Thanks a lot.
Another 150 questions.
Micro.
Well, yeah, but I think this was all very interesting and important, and the others can be a little shorter. Okay, there's a second question that comes up concerns cultural relativism, multiculturalism, and I see two very interesting aspects of this question. One is the question, do you think the fact that certain cultures are reluctant to adopt universal values such as the human rights is only because of the fact that the West has taken over these values as its own, and so they are perceived in some places as being imposed by world power on weaker societies. So there's a question about that. The universality or the Western, are values universal or are they Western or what? And then there's a very practical question here which I think is interesting, which is related to that, which is concerning Muslims in European countries in the context of the rise of Islamophobia. This person asks, what would you suggest to us Muslims and non-Muslim brothers and sisters in order to find a way of action to fight this racism in the most reasonable way?
Well, the first one expresses a common belief in the West, and an interesting belief. It's completely false, but it's a very common belief. In fact, I already gave one example of how it's false. The United States does not begin to approach third world cultures in its acceptance of universal values, such as the right of a woman, and in fact a subjugated woman from the lowest order possible, to be the chief executive. They can do that in Uttar Pradesh in India, but they can't do it in the United States. That's a case, and it's not the only case. There are women executives all over the third world and have been for decades. In the United States, it's only in 2008 that one could even run. Literally, didn't win, but at least you could run. That shows how backward we are as compared with the third world, and we should recognize that. As far as human rights are concerned, it is commonly believed that this is a Western invention which is imposed on the rest of the world. Just totally false. The gold standard for human rights is the Universal Declaration, 1948. That was put together with the contribution of representatives from all over the world, including large parts of the third world. They reached, they established the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, of course, many countries don't accept they accept it in words, but don't accept it in practice. And we talk about how, the bad third world people don't accept it in practice. In fact, the West doesn't accept it, radically rejects it. Talk about the United States, which initiated it. There's three parts to the Human Rights Declaration. They're all on a par. One is civil and political rights, like have free speech, formal elections, and so on. The second is socioeconomic rights, like the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to security in old age, and so on and so forth. And the third is cultural rights, the right to preserve and develop your own culture without interference. Now, the United States formally rejects in words, two parts of that, 2/3 of it. The U.S. rejects the socioeconomic rights, doesn't even discuss the cultural rights because they're so far out. So the United States rejects 2/3 of the Universal Declaration. Formally, it rejects the first part in practice, civil and political rights. Easy to demonstrate that. And for Europe, it's somewhat similar, not identical. So these are not Western values imposed on the third world. These are professed Western values which are radically violated by the West, not accepted. But the same is true of, say, democracy. The U.S. does not, and the West generally, does not support democracy in the third world. Quite the contrary. They systematically oppose it. Again, that's easily demonstrated. So the idea that these are somehow the Western values imperialistically imposed on the rest of the world, that's just propaganda. The most superficial investigation of the facts just shows that that's totally wrong. With regard to how to combat Islamophobia, I'm afraid we're back to that question of what the right tactics are. I can't answer. It depends on the circumstances. There are different conditions in which you have to oppose it in different ways, and that you just have to work out depending on where you are. I mean, it's not a novel problem. So say, throughout my life, anti-Semitism in the United States was never as severe as, say, in Nazi Germany, obviously, but it was severe. So, like, I grew up in a very much of a strongly anti-Semitic environment. In fact, I grew up with, as a child, literally with a visceral fear of Catholics. It took me a long time to stop being afraid of Catholics. Yeah, now I can talk to you. But this was real, could talk about the details, but it was slowly overcome. And I think Islamophobia can be overcome, but not easily. Black Americans, it's still not far from overcome. It's been hundreds of years. And if you want to know how severe the anti-black racism is in the United States, just take a look at the prison system. Prisons in the United States, prison incarceration in the United States is way beyond any other country per capita, any other country with statistics, way beyond Europe. And it's mostly blacks, black males. That's not a reflection of their genes. It's a reflection of the lingering effects of severe racism. And there are many other examples. So yeah, it's a long trek, it's a long way to go, but it has to be, you have to work hard on it, and you can make some progress. So things are better than they were in some ways.
Thank you very much. I've got a lot of questions here that are pretty specific and tough, I think. About what is about utopia and so on, and communism. Here it says in a country like Romania, just 20 years after the terror of communism, Romania, still 90% of the people don't have a notion of democracy. How can we bring people together and support the left activism if people are scared by the word socialism? Well, I don't expect you to have a practical answer, but this is just something. All right. It's the problem of a country like Romania, some of the ex-Soviet satellite states. It is asserted here that 90% of the people don't have any notion of democracy. How can we bring people together to support left activism if people are scared by the word socialism?